Growing up, I had no problems with hearing. I could hear crystal clear. If anything, my hearing was better than most people. But then, when I was 6 years old, my hearing started to deteriorate. I had this rare disease that impacted my hearing abilities. It got to the point where I couldn't hear anything. I was deaf. I was so distraught. I was depressed that I couldn't hear anything. I couldn't listen to music. I couldn't listen to the birds. I couldn't listen to the TV. My life was ruined. And it was even worse at school. All the other kids made fun of me because I had to use sign language to communicate or write on pieces of paper. They would make faces at me. They would tease the way I used my hands. It was horrible. And it was so hard adjusting. It's easier for people who were born deaf. They don't know any different. But I knew what it was like to hear. I knew what I was missing out on. You can't miss what you never had, but I could. School was especially hard. I could read and write, but whenever the teacher spoke or taught class, I found it so difficult to follow along. I had been in lip reading classes, so I could make out some words, but I was still learning. Sure, I was only around 10 years old, so it wasn't so crucial that I be able to understand everything completely, but I still wanted to learn. I didn't want to be left out. Eventually, I got used to it. I could use sign language fluently, and I was an expert at reading lips. My classmates started to stop bullying me. Instead, I turned into one of the popular girls. They thought it was so cool that I could do sign language, and a lot of them asked me to teach them. I was just happy to have friends again. Things were going well. I had accepted being deaf, and I could move on with my life. But then, miraculously, when I was around 15 years old, my hearing started to come back. I have no idea how, but all of a sudden I could hear people talking around me. I could hear the cars driving past, the birds chirping in the trees, all of it. I was ecstatic. I was in class when I heard the first sounds, and I jumped in my seat. A few people looked at me weirdly, but they hadn't realized what I had. My hearing was back. But after class ended, they still spoke to me as if I was deaf. I was going to say something. I was. But then, I heard a friend of mine saying my name. I walked over and realized she was talking about me behind my back. She was saying I was so annoying, and she didn't really like me, that I was a brat. I was so hurt. I ran away, and I didn't know what to do. I couldn't believe it. Was this what happened all the time? Did people talk about me a lot when I was right next to them? I was mortified. How could they do that to me? That's when I realized. No one had to know just yet. No one had to know I wasn't deaf anymore, that I could hear. Maybe I could use this to my advantage. Maybe I could use this to see who was talking about me. Maybe I could find out some secrets along the way. I know. This was a terrible idea. But at the time, I thought I was so smart. And I did find out a lot. You may think I should be ashamed, but you have no idea about the dirty secrets I heard from my time being deaf. But more on that later. I started to fake my deafness. I tried to keep it hidden. When there was a loud sound, I had to stop myself from looking in its direction. If I was deaf, I never would have realized. When the teacher said my name and I wasn't looking at him, I had to prevent myself from looking around. I had to wait for someone to tap me on the shoulder to get my attention, as if I really were deaf. And trust me, you imagine when someone calls your name, your first reaction is to look, right? But I had to ingrain it into me to pretend I was deaf, and it took a while. But I got used to it. One day, I was at my locker, and this cute boy was standing there with a bunch of his friends. At first, when they saw me, they were apprehensive, but I was facing the other way, so they relaxed. As long as I couldn't see their mouths, I wouldn't be able to hear what they were saying. Or so they thought. I realized they were talking about me. That's when I heard one of the cute boys, Sam, say that he had a crush on me. I was so excited and nervous. I tried not to react, but I could already feel butterflies rise up in my stomach. I was so happy then that I had pretended to be deaf. If I hadn't, I never would have realized I had an admirer. I immediately walked over to him, looking at him meaningfully. He seemed to panic a bit, probably because he thought I heard him, but then he seemed to remember I was deaf. Well, little did he know, I heard every word. Eventually, we started dating. I was pretty obvious with Sam, since I knew he definitely liked me, so it wasn't long before I asked him out. He was really really cute, and I found it so funny how nervous he was around me. But there was this girl, Hannah, who always flirted with my boyfriend. I was so mad at her. I wanted to scream at her when she said inappropriate things to him, but I realized that would give away that I could actually hear, so I bit my tongue. But she could be so aggravating. Like, there was this one time in class when I was packing my books in my bag and Sam was waiting for me. Hannah walked up to him. They were both behind me, so she probably didn't think I could hear, and she told him that she liked his haircut. She said he looked handsome. I barely stopped myself from turning around and slapping her in the face, but I had to use this to my advantage. I was pretending to be deaf for a reason, to see who was a true friend and who was fake. So I remained quiet. I would be at parties and I would be sitting there and people would be gossiping beside me, but they didn't care since I was the deaf girl. I would hear so many secrets, like how a girl in my class was pregnant, or how someone cheated on their partner, or how the teacher was getting a divorce, and so much more. No one knew it, but I was compiling a huge list of people I could blackmail with all this information. I realized I could start to use this for my own advantage. I found out that Hannah had a huge wart on her back. She would be so embarrassed if people found out about it. So I walked up to her at school with a note already in hand. I gave it to her. This is what I wrote. Hi, Hannah. I know about the wart on your back. If you want this secret to stay between you and me, then stay away from Sam. He's my boyfriend, not yours. She had looked up at me, her face already flushing red, and she had nodded. Fine, she hissed at me. I walked away, job done. I knew I didn't have to worry about Hannah being around Sam ever again. In those few years in high school, I became the notorious blackmailer of the school. If someone got in my bad books, they would surely regret it, because I had dirt on everyone, even Sam. I discovered his dad was in jail for some fraud activity, but I didn't bring it up with him. I wasn't that mean. Now, I'm not proud of it, but back then, I was a spoiled, tormented young teen. I liked to control people. You might be wondering how I managed to fake my deafness all that time. Well, it didn't last forever. I made one mistake that made everything fall apart. I was at a party, and Hannah was talking about me and my boyfriend. I was supposed to be deaf, so when I stepped backwards to hear a bit more clearly, they didn't seem to care. What I heard her say made me lose it. She talked about how Sam cheated on me with her. I couldn't help it. I turned around, screamed at her, spoke clearly, unlike a deaf person, and obviously gave away the fact that I could hear. Everyone was shocked. The music stopped playing. Hey, I thought you were deaf, someone yelled out. Sam walked over to me. Wow, you can hear again? I didn't know what to say. I had to expose myself. Everyone would know I was faking it. Hannah narrowed her gaze. Then I watched, helpless, as she suddenly realized what I had done. No, you faked it, didn't you? She said. I shrank back. Sam looked questioningly at me. What? That's not true, right? I said nothing. It was over. The game was up. What? That's crazy, a voice called. Jerk, someone else yelled. I scowled, turning on Sam. You cheated on me with Hannah? Sam's eyes widened. What? How did you... Ha! So that's why you revealed yourself. Hannah laughed. You heard me. Well, it's true. Sam and I kissed. Sam looked at her in shock. Hannah! Oh, who cares? She snapped. Your girlfriend already knows. I didn't know what to do. Sam had cheated on me, but everyone knew I had cheated them. Whose side would they take? Hannah looked at me viciously. Now I know. That's how you blackmail people. You heard everything, didn't you, you sneak? People started to whisper as they realized what I had done. Some looked worried as they searched back on all the things they had said in my presence. I saw now they would not be taking my side. I had lied to all of them. I had done something unforgivable. I didn't know what to do, so I bolted from the house. I went straight home, but I knew I could never go back to school. The next day, I told my parents I had to change schools. I couldn't go there anymore. My parents were so confused. You see, they still thought I was deaf too. I confessed to them all about it, how I had tricked people, how I had faked my deafness for the past year, and they were mortified. They couldn't believe I would do something like that. But eventually, they helped me out. Of course they did. They still loved me. We agreed I should move schools, get a fresh start, but the kids at the new school I moved to had heard about me. I was that deaf girl who faked her deafness. The news had spread around. Luckily for me, me, I only had 1 year left at high school, so I could escape it all at college. But that senior year was the worst year of my life. Even worse than when I found out I was deaf. Really deaf. When I was around 10 years old. People avoided me. They left mean notes in my locker. They called me names. But this time, I couldn't pretend to be deaf. I couldn't pretend I didn't hear what they said. And that's why they took great satisfaction in making my life so miserable. I had no friends. Literally none. Even teachers heard about what I had done at my previous school. And I could tell they looked at me with contempt. I don't know whether it was my own stupidity or just their bias, but I never got an A in that final year of high school. Now, I realize what a huge mistake I had made. I never should have manipulated people like that. I turned something amazing, the miraculous return of my hearing, into something of a weapon. I never should have done it. Well, I've learned my lesson now.